Today we'll be discussing how to use the Maintain hierarchy feature within Guardian. This is a useful utility for several purposes. The first and most obvious is adding items to your equipment or asset hierarchy. It makes a very quick and easy way to build your hierarchy up, and you can later then add more detail. The second function is moving equipment within the hierarchy. There's a drag and drop feature that allows you to pick up a branch or a single asset and move it to a new location in the hierarchy, at the same time adjusting its number and description if necessary. The third function is assigning cost accounts to individual items in the hierarchy, and there's a utility there called Cascade Accounts and Cascade Segments that will allow you to push accounts down a branch within the hierarchy. So if you have a location in the hierarchy or an area that uses the same cost accounts, you don't have to go to every piece of equipment in that area. You can start at the top of a branch and simply say push these accounts down. It'll save you a lot of time. So let's start by just adding some items to the hierarchy. You'll find the utility under the Setup menu, the Maintenance pop-out, and Hierarchy. Down the left side of the screen, you'll see any existing items that you've already defined in your hierarchy. And on the right side of the screen is the detail for the selected item that you've clicked on. In this case, I only have one item in the hierarchy because my database is empty, and as I select it, you can see that its details are being displayed. There's a couple of tabs here. Location and Warranty lets you define a few different characteristics of an asset. These are all optional fields. You do not have to use them. The specification allows you to define more detail about specific groups of assets, and that's a feature we'll discuss in another tutorial. And the Origin tab, which allows you to define who made the equipment and who you bought the equipment from. If you have predefined lists of manufacturers or vendors in the system, you can click the button, the name or the vendor button, to search for an existing item in the list. Otherwise, you can just type in the data that you'd require. So let's start by adding a couple of departments under our demo company. In order to do this, I'm going to click on the demo company. That's a normal left mouse click. And then I'm going to right mouse click and select Create Child. This will create a new branch underneath demo company. And at that point, I would give it an asset number. And in this case, I'm going to use D1 to stand for Department 1. I'm going to type in a description. And as I hit the Tab key to move from field to field, it will fill in the short description up to the first 15 characters. So it will just take the first 15 of your long description, put it in the short description. I could then go and fill in some of these other fields as required. I'm not going to in this case. It's very important when you're using this utility to save the items. And the save is simply clicking off of the item you're creating. So I'm creating Department 1. I'm going to click on Demo Company, and that will save that new item that I've created. I'm going to make another department very quickly here under Demo Company called Department 2. So I'm going to repeat the process. Right click, Create Child, D2, Department 2, done. I'll click off of it to save it. Now what I want to do is create a couple of new branches under Department 1. So I would click on Department 1, right click, say Create Child. And what I'm going to do is use this parent number as a prefix flag. And what that does is insert the number from the parent into the asset number field. So I can then just add to the end of that. So I'm going to call this 10, and the description will be Department 1, Area 10. And now you would obviously be using more meaningful descriptions for the equipment that you're defining. And I'm going to add one more area, and we'll call it 20. I'll use my parent number as a prefix. Department 1, 20. Department 1, area 20. So you can see that the hierarchy is taking shape fairly quickly. What we will now do is I'm going to click off of area 20 to save it. And let's say that I wanted this area 20 to reside under Department 2. So this is where the drag and drop, or the moving of items, comes into play. So I would click on Department 1 Area 20, and then I will just click and hold down the left mouse button and drag it to where I want it to live now. So I want it to live under Department 2. So I'll drop it right on top of Department 2, let go of my left mouse button, and it will ask me, am I sure I want to move this branch? I'm going to say yes. And that's now moved that item. And if it had children, it would also move the children of that item underneath Department 2. Now I may want to make a couple of quick changes here because my numbering is going to be different now. So I could click here and change the numbers. So Department 2, Area 20, and I'll just change my description as well. And I'll click off of that to save it. So we now have created a very basic structure and also moved an item within that structure. Now the last thing we'll look at is how we deal with cost accounts. Important to assign accounts to individual items in the hierarchy so that when you're performing day-to-day activities like posting time cards or purchasing items and charging them to an asset, you don't have to remember what account to charge it to. We'd rather the system simply default that information in for you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select Department 1, and I'm going to assume that everything in Department 1, including its children, will use the same set of accounts. I'm going to right-click on that department, and I'm going to say Cascade Segments. Now the segments relate to the material charges that you would incur in Department 1. So if I'm buying parts, this is the account that I want my parts charged to when I charge them to Department 1. I can click the Asset Expense button and click Search to select an account from the list. Now I'm just going to select my default Material Expense account. And I want to make sure that this Apply checkbox is ticked because that will push that account down through all of the children within Department 1. And when I click Apply, it will set those segments for me. I'll do the same thing. Right-click on Department 1 and select Cascade Accounts. This deals with the labor accounts. So when I'm posting time cards, these are accounts that will be applied so that I don't have to remember that every time I post a time card. And I'll click the button for regular time charges. I'm going to select, I've got one set up here, 100L for labor, and I'm just going to copy that into the other fields. Again, you want to make sure that the Apply checkboxes are checked. A handy feature to avoid overwriting accounts after you've set some up is only apply to blank fields. That would be useful if you're adding new items into the hierarchy and you want to push the accounts down from a higher level, but you don't necessarily want to overwrite existing data that you have in the system. So this will only fill in fields that are blank, typically the new items that you've just added. So I'm going to click Apply. And it's updated 6 fields, which is, again, not many, but when you're talking a whole branch, it is a big time saver. So that's the utility maintain hierarchy. You'll find that you'll use this utility typically quite heavily as you're setting up your database, and then sporadically as you're maintaining or moving things around within the database. I hope you found this useful. Thanks for listening.